Is it really the ADHD, or are you just not disciplined? Let's really talk about it. So this first week back at school has shown me a lot. It's kind of easier to do homework now. And what I mean is like learning how to structure the notes that I take and knowing how to set time to study and how to study in general. Being able to articulate my words has been a lot easier for me. It really has me thinking, because my first 2 years of college was like really, really hard. I didn't realize it until I guess a couple of weeks ago when my therapist told me. She made me take the DSM-5 test for depression, which, mind you, I didn't think I was depressed. I know I have anxiety. I know I have ADHD. But I didn't think I was still depressed, because the way depression looked like for me when I was like in 10th grade was different. Like, didn't want to get out of bed, would drag myself into each day. Every day felt like a loop. And so when my therapist made me take the test and I actually tested for it, I was like, oh, I kind of just got used to the feeling of being depressed. And throughout my first 2 years of college, I think that was a big factor as to why I wasn't as present in my schooling as I should have been. And on top of that, I went from a public school in New York to a private college in PA. And it was a PWI. And if you don't know what that is, that's a predominantly white institution. Do I have to say anything more besides that? It looked very different when I went into college my first 2 years. It just seemed a little bit easier for them, you know? Honestly, I feel like it was like a social class thing, because I was always looked at as like one of the smart kids, right? So very much stereotypical, like high achieving student burns out in her early adulthood, right? And for me, I kind of question that a little bit, because when people think of like high achieving, you think of like top of the class, creating their own clubs, presidents of things, student council, all of these things, right? As much as the emphasis of me being intelligent was present and predominant throughout my childhood, I never thought that I was extraordinary. For majority of my academic career, I don't feel like I had to apply pressure, just merely show up, you know? And I was a very dissociative child, so a lot of the times I was not present. Like, yes, I was in the room, but was I mentally there? Probably not. But when I was really smart and I would get praised for it. That was the problem. Long term, I ended up not really learning that much, you know, or not challenging myself the ways that I should have. And if we all know, public school sucks. Realistically, I would say that my high school was pre-K for teenagers. I don't remember majority of the things that I've learned. Like, and besides the fact that it was COVID, I'm not downgrading the teachers that were there. There was certain teachers who did leave a lasting impact on how I am academically. For sure. I'm not downgrading them. It's just, I know that I didn't have to apply myself to really get ahead. And in comparison to most students, they didn't want to try either. Let's say there was a deadline for a project, right? If majority of the class didn't do it, that deadline would get pushed further and further and further into the year. We would stay stuck on that one curriculum until everybody was done. So I just stopped giving a fuck. And it also didn't put any like flame under my ass to actually get what I needed to get done. So guess what I did? Not the homework. So when I got into college, it was a lot different because the structure in which the school system was set up was drastically different. You know, the stereotypical, you have to teach yourself basically majority of the time, especially when you have really like aggravating teachers. And honestly, I don't think most teachers are bad. I think that they just don't reflect onto your learning style, especially for a specific topic, because I feel like different subjects require different learning styles. And if that teacher isn't capable to not only manipulate, alternate, change, reflect, I don't know, reach you the way that you need to be reached, it's not going to hit the same, you know? And then that's where you have to necessarily teach yourself. And I did not grasp that in the first year at all. It took me the end of the semester to even figure out how I even needed to study for Spanish. And with the other students that I saw, they weren't having that hard of a time. It's like they knew how to study. And me being me, I was not going to ask you for study session. You know, I very much would stick to myself, stick to my room, and then stick to like my emerging leaders group, you know, and they rarely saw me. So, hey guys, sorry I was the problem. Sorry. It was really hard for me to understand that it wasn't the fact that I wasn't like smart. It was simply the fact that I didn't know how to apply myself. And then on top of that, let's go back to the depression. And it wasn't in the fact of like, oh, I hate life. It was more so, it was hard for me to show up for myself. And don't get me wrong, senior year, I did learn a lot about habits and following routines and implicating certain structures within your day so that you're able to show up for yourself and you're able to then do the things that you need to do so that future you feels better. But I wasn't around the right people to kind of root that in me, so I started it and then I let it go. And when I got to college, it was harder to even show up for myself again because I was like behind on schoolwork. And because I was behind on schoolwork, it was harder to focus. And because it was harder to focus, you see where the cycle goes. At first, I really did blame it on my ADHD. I was like, oh, like, it's hard for me to read. I have like 8 different tabs open in my head. Like, this is so hard. And don't get me wrong, all of those symptoms were very much still present. And again, I'm very much Fix It Felix. And I will go on YouTube and I would go on Google and TikTok or whatever and look up strategies and solutions and systems that would help me get what I needed to get done. But it was the implication part, obviously, that would hold me back. Dedicating yourself to building systems, habits, and routines is definitely a long game. Because back then, it's like I kept trying and I wouldn't go to the gym for like 3 days, and then I'd go for like 2 weeks straight and then miss a week, or I would get on top of my homework and I would get all of the missing assignments done. But while I was doing the missing assignments, all of the current assignments would pile up, and again, the loop would happen all over again. And I just felt stuck. I felt behind. Most days I just felt like the systems weren't working, or I felt like I wasn't able to maintain the systems and my brain wasn't compatible to even stay focused or maybe just stay quiet. Like, there was a lot of buzzing going on in my head, and my energy would be very much depleted after a couple of days. Like, I would feel so motivated and thrilled and determined to do my work, and then 3 days later, max, I'd completely run out of energy. It confused me a lot, and I kind of just blamed it on so many external factors, or kind of just accepted it as who I was because it kept happening over and over and over again. But now, this year, mind you, this is my second day of junior year. But realistically, like from a broader perspective, looking back, I feel 10 times more prepared. And again, you know, experience, knowledge, time, practice, all of these things do fall into play. But I wish I could tell me 2 years ago that it's a long game. You're not gonna feel comfortable in the next couple of months. You're not gonna feel like you're making any sort of progress. But you 2 years from now will feel it, because now I can sit and read 3-4 pages back to back of a textbook and know that I have the capacity to continue going on, and also do that within a reasonable amount of time. When I tell you, I used to have assignments where I had to read research papers. Research papers were probably like 7-8 pages long. Tell me why it took the whole day to read. Girl, what? And mind you, I'm attempting to stay focused. Very much lock myself in the room. Didn't really talk to anybody. Would try to put my phone down, and I would sit there and I would read. As I was reading, it was like nothing was processing. But I'm reading the words, but I'm not internalizing anything. And that was pissing me off. But now I'm able to read like pure data. Boom. Like internalized it, annotated, and like analyzed on top of that. So it really made me question, like, was it my ADHD or was it my lack of discipline? Because now, and two, again, with like going to public schools versus going to an out-of-state college, I was surrounded by so many different personalities. It was nice and refreshing to be surrounded by people who were passionate about what they wanted to study. Like, I've met people who wouldn't know what else to be besides being a teacher or besides becoming that surgeon, and they study and work their asses off every single day. And of course, we're all like teenagers and young adults, and we want to go drink and party and whatever the case may be. But at the end of the day, these people, stars, like pure stars, and I absolutely adore them. And honestly, it was really refreshing going from an environment where people barely wanted to be in the building, people barely wanted to be themselves, to a place where, you know, we might not have all the answers, but I know why I'm here. You know, for me, it was rare to find people like that, and I'm just really glad that I got to experience that, because it has influenced me in how I approach situations and how I apply myself currently. Because it's like, I've always believed in myself, you know, like, it was always I'll get there one day. You know, I'm not going to think too hard about it. I'm not going to be anxious about it, because I know it'll come to me. But there was no agency behind that, you know, like there's no passion or effort behind, it'll come. I'm just scratching the surface. I promise you, I'm just scratching the surface. And I'm excited and thrilled and blessed and enthusiastic over the fact that I have the mindset and opportunities and position to even be in this place. You know what I mean. you get where I'm going. It's just interesting to think about. I'm in my junior year, and I feel a little more ease complaining about it now, because it feels more practical now compared to 2 years ago, or compared to 4 years ago. If anything, I would complain about reading a 2-page paper, so imagine 40. I know that I can step back and refresh for the night and come back tomorrow and be able to tackle majority of it, at least. Because there's definitely a difference between like being forced to learn something that you don't care about versus not knowing how to apply yourself when curious about a certain subject. And I feel like not everybody gets the opportunity to learn the difference. I feel like there's a lot of missed opportunities with people, and especially I feel like in New York, it gets lost. Like the actuality of it gets lost in the need to survive and the need to get the highest paying job. And a lot of people are acting off of necessity rather than, you know, want. Let's kind of just acknowledge the fact that trauma limits our ability to be present. Just like with me when I was younger, I was very dissociative as a child. So it was hard for me to be present with other people or with my day-to-day around me. Because of that, I wouldn't apply myself. So honestly, I did not learn anything about me until like 2-3 years ago, when I was removed from my environment. And not everybody gets that opportunity, so they get lost in the mud. There's always another why behind the answer that you give. And what I mean by that is, it's never just one thing. It's never, oh, I don't like school, it's boring, I don't like learning. It's okay, but why don't you like learning? Aren't you curious? Don't you want answers? Is it the fact that you've been shut down your whole life, and every time you asked a question you were blamed for it, or you was shut down? Or maybe people aren't teaching you the way that you need to be taught. Maybe they're not answering the questions that you're actually curious about. Understanding what questions to ask, and also knowing the answers to those questions for you personally, makes all of this learning stuff 10 times more easier. Maybe they're not coming from the approach that best helps you get the answers. Because for me, I'm very much a why person, you know? Like, in order for me to properly do something, I need you to break it down for me. Maybe I sound a little slow, but there's so many ways to interpret instruction or stories that I feel like you need to give precise details in order to fully grasp the actual facts. If you tell me to organize your makeup, I need to know in what order. How do you like them organized together? Do you like them organized based off of the steps in which you take in order to get your makeup done, or do you like them organized by size? I need to know the answers to these things, or else I might do it in a way that doesn't suit you best. Let's go back to Spanish, right? I was failing Spanish on multiple accounts, you know, attendance, bad grades, didn't understand the language, didn't study, you know, and I had to question myself. And the questioning did take the whole semester, but I got to the end of it, and it made me realize that asking the right questions can change your approach, and changing your approach can give you a better insight as to how to fix the problem. With me, one, I had to acknowledge that Spanish in itself kind of sounds like music to me, because I grew up with Spanish speaking people around me. I would listen to them speak, and I could understand like the emotions behind it and like what they were trying to convey. but don't ask me what they said word for word, please. Like, don't do that. I ended up learning to like tune it out as like buzz noise or white noise in the background, because it wasn't a conversation I needed to be a part of, obviously. Over time, I didn't realize that that was kind of like detrimental to my learning experience, because now I'm not able to pick up on the syllables of the words. Now, when I'm in class, I'm hearing words and I have a pre-exposed understanding of what those words mean. And that might not be the actual definition of what the word actually is. And that messed me up in so many accounts. So that was my first issue, right? But then when it came down to the grammar, I realized I didn't know grammar in English. So how was I supposed to learn it in Spanish? Like, don't get me wrong, I know the basics, like nouns, adjectives, like punctuation, the use of punctuation, synonyms, like metaphors. Like I knew that, but I didn't know conjugating, and I didn't know the stem and the root of a word, and the fact that like there's pluralization within Spanish that's completely different from pluralization within like the English language, or how the sentence structures would switch. All of these things I was not understanding, or I didn't know that I needed that baseline of information to then proceed to learn the language. And that's where I was confused half of the time, because I'm looking at my Spanish teacher like, girl, you're confusing me in English. How do you expect me to learn another language? Like, you're actually confusing me. So until I was able to realize that I wasn't failing just because I didn't understand the language, but because I didn't understand the initial step of understanding grammar first, I was confused and lost. But once I was able to understand that part, therefore that allowed me to then further question myself of like, okay, so what do I not know about grammar? What do I need to learn? How do I apply these things? And then from there, how else do I study? What other categories within this subject do I need to find out study strategies for? That's only one case of there being another, the why under the why, reasoning behind the initial reasoning. So when it comes down to school and college, I was able to learn to ask those questions and to find the answers to those questions. So once I found the answers to those questions, it just became more about applying myself and constantly reapplying myself. And I feel like that goes for so many people. Like, you could really be good at whatever you want as long as you apply yourself, as long as you ask questions as to why there are certain things limiting you. And once you find the answer to that, you can apply yourself in the correct way to then achieve the goal. You get it? Like, it just takes the right question to get the right approach to then therefore achieve the goal. Boom, mic drop. Understand that it's gonna take a minute, and a minute is not 2 months. A minute is not in a week and a half when people say in 2 weeks you'll see results. No, I understand that people have been saying this forever, like show up continuously for yourself, even when you don't want to show up. Yes, all of that's true, but I feel like intentionality is just as important. On top of showing up, you have to be intentional, and if you don't have the combination of both, I'm sorry, your results are gonna come really slow. And that's another thing that pisses me off. Like, I don't want to say that, oh, I've been working my whole life, I did this, that, and the third, and I was really smart growing up. Then what happened? Why are you 30, 40 and you got nothing to show for it? Besides the fact that you tried over and over and over again, but yet you still in the same spot. Back to the, is it your ADHD, or do you just not ask yourself the right questions? Every single aspect of wellness is connected. Your financial literacy, understanding of nutrition, your understanding of fitness, your curiosity, your morale. On top of that, let's really connect the dots. Is it the ADHD, or do you just not get enough sleep? Or do you just not get enough nutrition? Or do you just not work out enough? Or do you just not know the right strategies and systems to set in place, not only just to be a human, but to also be an academic weapon, to then also just live life and appreciate things and be grateful and have a spiritual presence, and also have the ability to be free. Let's run that back, because that's a whole different story and conversation of the word freedom. I do understand why people don't question it and they stay rooted and stuck in what's comfortable. But again, life is difficult either way, but you can be difficult and never change, or you can have a difficult life and make progress along the way. I'm just saying I picked the second one. don't know about you, but hopefully because you're watching this video, you picked the second one too. I don't think I touched up on all of the points and topics that I have running up here, but please continue the conversation in the comments. Talk to each other about how you might take approaches differently and the things that you learned that have worked for you when it comes down to applying yourself and being present in who you are and the things that you want to achieve and finding purpose. All of this is necessarily just finding purpose as an individual, not as an individual in society, but as an individual for you. And definitely want to hear what you guys think, because I know that when I have these conversations with like my best friends and the people that I have close around me, you always learn from it, you know? So I do want to hear what you guys think. Besides that, I'm gonna stop rambling and I'm gonna let y'all go on about y'all day. So bye.